Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to Grand Tactician, the Civil War. This is going to be part number 2 of our look at the historical tactical battle of the Battle of the Wilderness. We are fighting on the side of the Union against the Confederate forces. In the first episode, we managed to fight a pretty intensive little battle against General Ewell's Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia, which was deployed initially. Warren's Corps under the Army of the Potomac marched forward and engaged the enemy. We were able to flank them on one end, but then they came back and flanked us on the other end. And there was sort of this interesting situation where one of our corps was wrecked by the rebels while we wrecked, one of our divisions was wrecked by the rebels as we wrecked one of their divisions. At the end of the day, I think we got more troops in a better position, and then we sort of have Sedgwick's corps coming down from the north. So Ewell's in a lot of trouble. But overall, it's been a pretty interesting fight so far. I think most of Ewell's corps is gone now. Some of them may have retreated and could rally, but they're pretty much done. But we'll see what happens. The Confederates should have 2 more corps coming, and we'll see what happens. It looks like the Confederates may be deploying some troops in the south, where Hancock's corps is coming on the field, but Hancock is somewhat isolated, so if we don't get down there to support him, or if we don't block off the reinforcements on the edge of the map, you could end up having Hancock outnumbered and outmaneuvered by Hill and Longstreet's corps in succession. So we'll see how that plays out. But this was taken from a live stream from my Twitch channel from a couple of days ago, and without further ado, let's jump right in. Grierson. I mean, there's no doubt that Sheridan was a very charismatic leader. I think you see that in the Valley campaign. What was the name of the battle where Early's troops had surprised Sheridan's troops and driven them back? And then Sheridan comes riding forward into the retreat, basically, and rallies his men and gets his men fighting again. Yeah, was it 3rd Winchester? No, I think it was after that, wasn't it? 3rd Winchester was a victory, but that wasn't. This was Cedar Creek. That was it. And so Sheridan's like riding forward into this maelstrom of defeat. His men are streaming back from the front. They've been driven back over a mile. Sheridan was in the rear at some meeting. It wasn't with Grant, was it? But he was not yet back from, I think, a meeting with Grant, and he hears of this disaster that his army had been flanked and pushed from the field, and he rides up and he rallies his men, and on the same day that his men were driven from their positions, he leads a counterattack that absolutely breaks Early's army. So, I think in terms of Sheridan's leadership, there's no doubt that he was a tremendous leader. My problem is his own selfishness and glory-seeking. It gets in the way of my respect for the man, because, again, it's not just that he's rough, it's that he gets in feuds with people who he had considered friends. I think it was at 3rd Winchester, and I can't remember the name of the officer, who he was very good friends with, who basically he tried to take entire credit of a maneuver that was not his own doing, and he wrecks a friendship over it. He gets the credit for it in the papers, and his friend who is a subordinate, you're the commander on the field. Give your subordinates the credit they deserve. You don't need all of that. Okay, so end of the day. Troops are resupplied. Start redeployment. Okay. All right. Let's redeploy these troops. So it's the end of that day fighting. Where are you, Hancock? All right, we're going to move Hancock forward so that he can advance. We're going to move. We've already taken this resupply point, so I don't think the rebels can bring additional reserves, and it looks like we've spotted some, as I move these troops to the edge of this blue line, which is the furthest forward we can advance. I spotted some rebel positions here. So we're going to move Sedgwick down this roadway, down here. I don't think I can, I can't advance him further than that. But that's good. So we've got Sedgwick up that way. I really like George Gordon Meade, by the way. All right. So, and then I think we're going to leave. My only complaint is I feel like Army, I understand why you would issue orders organizationally at a corps level, and so like if you move a corps commander, the entire corps should move in this game. I think that's very well done. But what I would prefer in the game is that you have the option for Army commanders to be freeform so I can move them wherever I want. If I try and move Meade closer to the front, it will move the entire army to that position in a straight line. So that's a little bit of a grumble for me. I hope they unlock army commanders. All right. So that's that. I guess we'll just get them underway. Agree completely, Super Chacho. I think Meade is massively underrated. And it's not even just Gettysburg. He was an all-around competent commander. The Wilderness, by the way, was largely Meade's battle. Now you can argue, I think there's some that argue that it's what convinced Grant to take a more active hand in the Eastern Theater. But I don't think that's because of any shortcomings on Meade's part. I think it's just a recognition of like some figures who technically would have like outranked Meade and would have chafed at the bit of being under his command, like Burnside, who was in his own command. It was, one of the major problems with the Battle of the Wilderness is that the Army of the Potomac was under Meade's direct command, but there was an additional corps under Ambrose Burnside who was attached directly to Grant. And the reason they did this, I believe, was because he would have outranked Meade technically in terms of they had the same rank, but he had more seniority because he had commanded the Army of the Potomac earlier. He had been promoted earlier. And so this corps was kept almost like a floating reserve for Grant, but Grant left the bulk of the fighting of the Wilderness to Meade. And so Meade had no authority to call Burnside up and get Burnside to do what he wanted him to do. And Grant was a little bit late or a little bit slow in taking assertive control over Burnside, and it probably cost the Union a chance to achieve more at the Wilderness. John Singleton Mosby. He was friends with Grant after the war, wasn't he? I was listening to the Chernow biography on Grant not that long ago on Audible, and I believe he befriended Grant during Grant's presidency. He didn't seem entirely opposed to Reconstruction either. At least that was my impression. I haven't read a ton about him, but it seemed like he was working with Grant during Reconstruction and kind of telling Grant like what the mood of the South was and things like that. Okay, let's go, boys. Oh shit. Rebs are coming north. Let's slow this down to 2. Hancock. Get your corps moving. Is this an issue with Hancock not being in communication? This is again is the problem with the way that the game handles the army commanders. Where is Meade anyway? I'm leaving this corps up here because I don't know if additional reinforcements could still theoretically show up here in my rear. But let's do this. Let's pause. See if we can't get Grant down here. See, there you go. The whole army is going to move. But then I will... But if I issue orders for him to stop, he'll stop, right? Ugh. Well, I guess I could do this. Move Meade down there like that, and then just take direct control over Sedgwick if I can find him in this mass. Move him like that. Move Hancock like this. Meanwhile, I do want Warren's corps to stay up here. Just in case, like I said, the enemy shows up on my flank there. So hopefully Meade will still move to the place I wanted him to move, now that I've overridden all of those orders. But the troops are not going to start moving until they get orders to not move. Which is kind of silly, too, is like if I issue the order from Meade, then everybody moves as if they got the order right away? Or that seems to be what they're doing anyway. Oh, that looks bad. Look at that, like, circular... They're going to move here, and then they're going to swing north? I sure hope... Oh, my God, there's a lot of Rebs. What is going... Whoa, whoa, whoa. Pause. Okay, so we're strung out like all hell. I'm just going to take direct command of some of these troops. What are you doing? You're doing dumb things. You're going to get this whole corps destroyed, aren't I? Because of the... This is stupid! Look at this weird maneuver. Then I have to wait for the orders, which I get, like, it's a cool system, but I think it needs refinement. All right, well, if Longstreet arrived down here, I assumed it was just Hill, but if Longstreet arrived, then there's no reason not to move Warren down as well. Hancock probably needs to lengthen his line a little bit further south. These guys are in the rear of the rebel army. Just like hanging out here. Hey guys, it's okay. I've got men to spare. So if I get a couple of brigades wrecked. So who's all here? I'm looking for the commanders. 3rd Corps and 2nd. So Longstreet and is the 3rd Hill? No, the 2nd. So it'd be Ewell and Hill down here. Where's the 1st Corps? I don't know if Longstreet's here yet. All right, Hancock, you're getting into position. Sedgwick is still getting into position. Warren's coming down, which should drag Grant and Meade down here. Send them in. We got more men. Hashtag Union 1864. All right, so Hancock is now in position largely. It's an ugly looking line. The Rebs are coming forward. Hey, Sedgwick, how about you hit them in the flank now? They're marching right in front of your lines, Sedgwick. Meanwhile, Wheaton is engaged with rebel artillery. He's flashing red, which isn't good. Oh, you're retreating. Broken. All right, Hancock, your line's going to get overlapped. The enemy is going to overlap Hancock's division, or corps. So we are going to... Nope, not that. Barlow, form a single line. I want you to refuse that. Nope. All right, so Barlow... All right, so you're forming a single line. Good, good. And then, no, I don't want you to be quite that far north, but you're going to refuse your line back. Right about here, should we? We can use the orange plank road as an anchor for our flank. Oh, the enemy recognized that they're outflanked horribly with Sedgwick now coming down on their flank. So the AI is making probably the sound decision to pull back. All right, so Hancock, you're going to go into a single line formation for your corps, and then we're going to advance. Sedgwick's coming down in a messy, messy formation here. Where are you, right? Or Warren? No, I had you. All right, I'm going to try and get Warren into the rear. I still haven't seen Longstreet yet, though. Okay, so they're trying to pull out. We've got a couple of brigades that are engaging them on that flank. Now, my historical knowledge is coming in handy there. It's like, I know Longstreet is coming. I know Hill is coming. We should deploy here. Like, these are things that obviously historical generals do not have the advantage of. They're trying to pull that whole line back. All right, Hancock, your men, you should be about ready to move forward now. Not quite how I want you to move. So move like this. All right, Hancock, move those boys. No promise it's going to take a while for those orders to arrive. Warren is coming down as well. So he's going to use these major roads to hopefully get in the rear of the entire rebel army. Meanwhile, Sedgwick's boys are engaged, although his flank brigade here, the 3rd, a little bit exposed there. So we're going to bring this 3rd brigade down here to support it. We'll also bring this 1st brigade down here. Meanwhile, it looks like we shattered one of these enemy brigades. Perrin's brigade, by the looks of it. Ricketts, you move your division forward. I'd rather you be in a single line, sir. That would be far more useful. The double line is nice from a support perspective, but... Neal's brigade is going to get shredded. Oh, look at those casualties just racking up. He's up like... He's fighting a division off by himself. The 2nd brigade down here under Grant. Different Grant, Lewis Grant. Move this 3rd brigade down here. So we'll support him. Meanwhile, we've got Warren is starting to move down and good. Nice. Look at those pretty road. Look at these pretty formations right on the major road. Well, less pretty when I zoom in, but pretty on a map. Meanwhile, Hancock is moving. The enemy has not done a good job. The AI kind of clumped its troops in the north to meet the threat, and that means that I think we're going to end up having a pretty easy time of it. Gibbon, you'll move your division here. Bernie, you move here. Hit him from the rear! Don't worry, boys. Longstreet's not coming. We'll know if this changes red if they show up there. They might have come down the Orange Plank Road, now that I think about it, because he did hit Hancock, and that's where Hancock came on the map. Which is why I'm deploying Warren where I am, because one, he can close and finish off this enemy corps, but he can also act as a speed bump for Hancock's corps. Not Hancock's, Longstreet's corps. Come on, Bernie, get up there. Gibbon, get your boys in. Or some of them actually already in the engagement, so let's move that line forward a little bit. All right, so Hancock's boys are in. Sedgwick's boys are doing good work. 2,600 casualties taken by Sedgwick's boys. All of these boys in Sedgwick's formation. Look at these enemy units. Several of them are routing. Others are trying to pull back as we move Warren's corps in behind him. Crawford's 4,000 men. Let's close the gap. No, I want you in line. Griffith's division also took a fair number of casualties here. Wait for Longstreet. Don't tell me what to do. We're going to finish off 2/3 of Lee's army before Longstreet arrives. I think they're trying to stack up here on this flank to push back Sedgwick here. They've got a bunch of troops on that flank. Meanwhile, there's like 3 brigades down here facing the bulk of Hancock's corps. are you marching to? Where are you going? Where are you marching all the way down here for? What are you doing, Ayers? Are you a coward? Are you a coward? Uh-oh. It's getting a little bit laggy here. All right, right. I want you to move your men forward. Okay. All right. Let's move the Iron Brigade down here. The Iron Brigade will be Longstreet's speed bump. We'll move down there to take that map, that edge of the map, to see if maybe that... I have no patience. Issue the damn orders. Get your men moving. Alright, so these guys are routed. Thomas's brigade. Johnson's division, Early's division. Most of these guys are just division commanders. There is one brigade there that's shattered and is being pummeled, but the rest of those guys are all just division commanders. Well, this would be the end of the Army of Northern Virginia, I think, at this point. Or pretty damn near it. Be interesting to see what the casualties look like at the end of this fight. People get saddened about 400 casualties in modern wars. People forget thousands per battle in the Civil War. Hey, thousands per battle in World War II, right? World War II, I think, actually had more combat deaths than the Civil War did for the U.S. When you include disease, the Civil War was still the bloodiest, but I believe in terms of actual combat deaths, World War II had more. This reminds me a little bit of, if you've seen the movie Waterloo, the like 1970s movie Waterloo, where Napoleon's army has shattered. There's a battalion of old guard that are left sitting there basically surrounded by the British. And they call on them to surrender, and they refuse, and then they just, like, wheel the troops out of the way and just hit them with, like, canister at point-blank range. Feels a little bit like that. Bearstruck, thanks for the follow. Yes, Super Chacho, I'm aware. Obviously, the Soviets lost many more men than the U.S. did in World War II. Interesting fact, though, which I did not know. I was listening to Horn Fisher's Fleet at Flood Tide book, which deals with the 1944 campaigns in the Pacific, and I think also 45 to the conclusion of the war. And one thing he was talking about in that book is that between June 6th, the landings in Normandy, and August of 45, when Japan finally surrendered, the United States suffered a total of 1 million casualties. That includes killed, wounded, missing, all that. But the United States suffered a total of 1 million casualties in those last, 18 or 14 months of the war. In the first, 2.5 years, so from basically December of 41 until June of 44, so all of 42, all of 43, and then half of 44, as well as the 1 month of 41, the U.S. lost something like, I think it was 300,000 casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. So they lost 300,000 casualties in the first 2/3 of the war, and then in the final third of the war, and my math may be off here in terms of thirds and quarters or whatever, but in the final third, they lost 1 million. Which I never I never knew that it was. I knew obviously that like Okinawa was a nightmare show and Iwo Jima was a nightmare show, but I didn't realize, relatively speaking, the early war was so much less bloody. Which makes sense, right? Because for most of 42, the U.S. was trying to get ready for war. But I guess I would have thought the 43 campaigns were pretty bad. Obviously, you didn't have. I think the reason that all happens is you've got the culmination of the major land campaigns in Europe. So you've got D-Day, you've got the Battle of the Bulge, you've got Market Garden. All of that occurs simultaneously with the landings in the Marianas, with the landings in the, I don't know what the island group is, but Iwo Jima and Okinawa and the Philippines. The U.S. just got a steamroller going in the Pacific in those last 14 months, as well as in Europe. And so you had two major simultaneous wars occurring. Again, still doesn't compare with Russian overall casualties, but for the United States to lose a million casualties in the span of just over a year, I mean, there's nothing like that in American military history. I think probably the closest thing you would have seen would have been like the Overland campaign in 64. But yeah, so I didn't know. Apparently, my great-grandfather was a lieutenant commander in the Navy. He fought in World War I and World War II. I believe he was an engineer with the Seabees. I don't know if he was just an engineer in World War I, or I don't know what he did in World War I, but he was in the Navy in both those wars. I just found that out today. I knew he was in World War II. And then my grandfather, I knew he was a medical officer, I believe, on the USS Oklahoma City, a Cleveland-class cruiser. So he was on the USS Oklahoma City during the Battle of Okinawa, and they also formed a bombardment task force that bombarded Japanese shore positions, I believe, on the home islands. And then his brother, which I guess would technically be my great uncle, was also in the Seabees, and he fought in World War II, but he also fought in Korea. So he was. So between them, they spanned World War I, World War II, and Korea. All Navy men, which makes sense why I've got a little bit of a fascination with the Pacific Theater, I guess. Surrender! The enemy commander is not continuing the fight and has surrendered to us. You've won the battle. Now, the casualties feel low. It's 17... This math doesn't add up. This math doesn't add up at all. It says 17,000 of 52,000 total casualties, but it only says 7,500 of the rebel infantry. I think it just pulled the historical numbers. 17,000 rebels were... No, because the Union lost 17,000. The rebels lost 11,000. We lost what the rebels lost in the Battle of the Wilderness. The rebels lost 17,000, I guess? I don't know. But if they surrendered to us, can we just consider the Battle of the Wilderness to be the end of the war in the East? We surrounded and forced two Confederate corps to surrender, and maybe Longstreet's corps escapes, but the rest of the rebel army was bagged. Victory against the Army of Northern Virginia at the Battle of the Wilderness. Meade and Grant will be the heroes of the war. Hopefully. Anyway, guys, so we won the Battle of the Wilderness without Longstreet even apparently arriving. This is another one of those interesting battles where the Union has the ability to deploy more troops initially, and they can easily outmaneuver and outnumber the rebels into a pretty comprehensive defeat. It really goes to show you, I think, two main things are apparent in a lot of these battles. One, the game probably doesn't do enough to hide information about where the enemy units are. Sometimes it's hard to find them, but it feels really easy to get up and around the enemy flank in a way that, like, obviously I'm informed by history, so I know how to fight this battle better than the commanders in the real world did, because they didn't know where the rebels were, what was coming, what was happening, and so some of their timidity in some cases or bungling is somewhat understandable. But it probably also indicates the game may need to do a little bit more to mix things up. Now, the tactical battles in the campaign are a bit more challenging because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't always know what the enemy's going to bring against you. So I think those are pretty interesting. But I do think that that maybe the game needs to do a better job of hiding enemy positions so that, you could stumble into an enemy flank, and the first thing that you might know about, maybe an ambush from an enemy could be, the first volley that pours into your own flank. So I think, there'd be some interesting ways on how maybe you hide that. I think it would be a challenge because, you could also end up leading to people marching around these big maps without ever running into each other if you make it too hard to find them. But I don't know. It's just sort of general thoughts. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the Battle of the Wilderness, a total victory for the Union forces under my command. That'll do it for today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.